when you go out and searched when you go back in.
Yeah, you have to go through the little metal thing, and they wand you and all kinds of stuff.
Sorry, maybe we should have told you.
I don't care. I mean, I guess some schools, it is a big deal because they have to make sure they're getting accurate scores. For
Right.
They don't have a minimum score, so.
Right.
The minimum score at Auburn was like a 400, I think, and that was like way down there. They just did it to do it, just to have you take a test.
GREs?
I said I've never had a test that made me feel so stupid in all my
I haven't
life.
seen many masters in music programs that require it. But.
Well, they used to have subject GREs, maybe they still do. I had to take the music GRE to get into Michigan for grad school, and I did not get into Michigan, but I scored a perfect on the GRE, and I'm like, why do you require it?
I have never seen a music GRE. Now it's this basic.
Yeah, I did the other one too.
Here, learn this and do these calculus problems.
Yeah, I always did pretty well on that kind of stuff. Yeah. Okay, I would like to proceed with your portion, and since we're going to be teaching, I think I'll just let you each sit in this chair as you describe yourself briefly and your theory experience, and not everything you know about theory, but where the further reaches of your theory knowledge are. And who would like to go first?
Isn't that your favorite question
Well,
ever?
come to
Go for it, Les.
Okay,
Tell us your name.
my name is Lynn Jenkins. This is actually my fourth college that I've been to. Third university, though. One of the colleges I went to did not teach music at all. I was only there for a semester because they didn't have music. First college I went to was Jacksonville State University. The way the theory classes were set up was 3 and 2, the 3 days of instruction are written, and the 2 days of oral skills. So I did have experience there. I had 2 separate theory teachers at Jacksonville. And then when I was at Pensacola, I had a theory teacher there. Basically, Pensacola was a junior college at the time, but now it's a university. But at the time I went, it was junior college. And so we really only went through sophomore theory. And then when I got here, Dr. Durant was my teacher for, I think I was here for three and a half years. Anyway, I think I started the second semester of sophomore theory, and then on through junior. And did we have senior theory? No, just junior theory, counterpoint. Learned quite a bit about counterpoint from Dr. Durant. He told me quite a bit about that, and corrected everything that I did wrong, because I did a lot of things wrong when it came to counterpoint. But so I guess one of the knowledges that I have is kind of an overview of. I don't want to say an overview. I've taken from a lot of teachers. I've got a lot of instruction from 3 to 4 different music theory instructors. So I've gained a sense of diversity when it comes to that part. I feel like I have a decent knowledge of solfege, sight singing. I'm pretty okay at that. I don't really enjoy analysis very much, but I can do it. I think I have a basic knowledge. So.
Would you like to tell us your farthest theory skill, like one topic you could name?
I'd say part writing.
Okay. All right, Lynn, thank you.
Well,
You have to applaud everyone.
oh, what the heck?
So my name is Wayne Fillingen. I attended 2 different universities, University of Mobile and University of South Alabama. I didn't ever take theory at South Alabama. I took it all at University of Mobile with Dr. Becky Lombard, who I think is now at the seminary in New Orleans. we did not learn solfege. We learned by numbers. Everything we did was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 7, because we didn't say 7. And I've been teaching for 9 years, with a couple of that being a basic music theory course for high school. It wasn't specifically for AP or for IB, it was just to teach music theory. So I basically taught first semester, first year freshman theory. And I taught from the book that I used at University of Mobile, which would have been up to part writing, intervals and chords and major and minor scales in the circle of fourths and fifths. So my weakness actually in theory is probably once you get to counterpoint. That would probably be where I didn't take in college. We had theory 1, theory 2, and form and analysis. So that was the way the theory was laid out at Mobile, and the form part was okay. That probably my farthest reach into theory would be beyond part writing. I guess I would be decent with analysis. My oral skills are pretty good. Match pitch really well. Melodic dictation was good, and we did the same thing. We had the 3-2 split where we did 3 days of written work and 2 days of oral. So I guess that's where we are. Counterpoint is probably my weakness.
All right, thanks, Wayne.
My name is Stephen Smith. I have gone to the University of South Alabama all my life, well, since I've been going to college. So I'm not very experienced with other programs, music. With music theory, I'd say my experience was good. I had Dr. Wood my freshman year for freshman theory, and it was 5 days a week. We would do all ear training and writing, all that stuff. And then when I became a sophomore, I started taking from Dr. Durant, and we were doing augmented sixth chords and stuff. I started out pretty weak at that, but then I think I got pretty good at it. And then I think maybe my strongest theory is counterpoint. And I do teach intervals and basic theory to piano students, but they're not really the age to be teaching like stuff we're going to be learning here, other than intervals and stuff. So.
Thank you, Stephen.
My name is Victor Anzulis. I have my bachelor's and a master's degree from Pensacola Christian College. There took freshman theory was a separate 3 and 2, 3 days a week lecture and then 2 days a week oral skills. Sophomore music theory and graduate music theory were integrated, so we did them all throughout. Each day had a little bit of everything. I also took formal analysis, a class in formal analysis in my graduate school. So I'd say my farthest extent, harmonic analysis, pretty comfortable with, formal analysis, and I did overview of 20th century techniques, not in depth, but I have overview of those. I just did not take a formal class in counterpoint and sophomore theory. We did do an overview of counterpoint and some in graduate music theory as well. But I'd say that's probably my stronger weakness. Oral skills, we did Fixto, which has been interesting. I kind of have leaned towards liking movable a bit more, but it's a very foreign field to me. So that Fixto is what I learned, and did not as much dictation as I'd like, mostly melodic, not so much harmonic dictation or four-part. Part writing as well. Also took a class in choral writing and arranging where we kind of did more, delved into part writing beyond the music theory point. So there it is for me.
Alright, my name is Hannah Roberts. I actually did college online, so most of my study was out of textbooks. I didn't really study with teachers, except I would correspond with them and they would grade my assignments and all. So I actually didn't go to class. But I studied, I did counterpoint and I did 3 form analysis classes, getting up to about starting on analyzing impressionist music, which is fun when you start getting into all the modes and everything. I did, in theory, I did part writing, and I got up to, augmented 6th and 13th chords, and dabbled in modes a little bit, not much. I would say probably my weakest area was oral skills and ear training. I did some courses in it, but I know a little bit about solfege, but I never studied it actually. I never learned it. So that's kind of about me.
Did you use a text
For
music theory?
yes, I don't know if you're familiar with Dean Kincaid from the American Conservatoire of Music. He wrote a book of Principles of Harmony.
Do you still have the book?
I do, yes.
Well,
Would you like me to bring it sometime?
yes, when we divide and conquer music theory books.
Actually, I took all my courses through from his books. So
I'd be interested in seeing that.
yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Well, it seems like we're all well prepared. What I was looking for is like, where did you get to? I was looking for some terms. Some people did mention augmented 6 chords and things like that. That's kind of where I was going with that. And I didn't want to spoil the fun by mentioning it. But when I evaluate graduate students, I test them on augmented 6 chords, and if they can do augmented 6 chords, it means they had sophomore theory and they understood it. If they can't, they have to take graduate theory review. And when I was at Alabama, I evaluated all of the entering graduate students with that. And I have been personally flattered by the students who have left here to go to grad school. Each and every one of them has passed their graduate diagnostic exam and not had to take graduate theory review. I teach in the sophomore class I teach keyboard style instead of vocal style, and I'll go over the differences. But I have a funny story. One of my students, and he was an assistant of mine too, he went to University of Oregon as a composer, and he wanted to get a theory fellowship, so he had to take the theory fellowship test. He didn't get the theory fellowship, he did get a composition fellowship, and then sometime during the first semester or quarter, he went to see the head of theory and goes, well, I'd just kind of like to know what I did wrong, because I really thought I'd done well, and I was surprised, And the thing was, the graduate student who had graded it had not understood keyboard style and thought, oh, well, he's dropped the voice out here, and counted all this stuff off. And the theory professor looked at it and was like, oh, well, this is all perfect. So, just as a quick way you might, if this were vocal style, we would say that this was in close position because this is less than an octave from that. Okay? Now, in keyboard style, and you notice the bass is going down. In keyboard style, that would be that same chord. And there's reasons why I do keyboard style. Now, let's take, for example, say we had a first inversion chord and we were doubling the tonic there. Do you see how there's two stems on that note? Now, take another example. That sounds exactly the same, but in music theory, those are two different chords. Because in piano style, of course, it would sound the same. Here we're doubling the C, here we're doubling the G. So that's what tricked up the people at Oregon was the difference between the stemming. I very much like keyboard style because it is, also the difference between vocal and keyboard style would be a bracket instead of a brace. I do want to discuss keyboard style a lot, but what it helps me with is what I call the BVLP, which is basic voice leading pattern. When you are doing theory exercises, you are doing theory exercises. You're not writing music. I like to do part writing in keyboard style and in the very most basic progression, meaning the least movement from one note to the next. And from there, you can expand that into what we call instrumentally elaborated music. I'll give a couple of very piano examples here. Basic voice leading pattern. Oh, big handful of mess there. That was the B flat prelude from the Well-Tempered Clavier. And that was by a composer named J.S. Bach. He was born in 1685 and lived till 1750. Okay, so we take basic voice leading patterns and we can elaborate them into instrumentally elaborated things. Also, we can take in our analysis instrumentally elaborated music and reduce it to its basic voice leading pattern. Now, when we do that, do we make a better piece of music? No. Has nothing to do with the music. What it does allow us to do, and this is the reason for analysis, is to better understand the beauty and the power of the music. There really isn't any other reason to do that. Music theory is building to a point not to make you a composer and not to make you a performer, only to allow you to get to a point that you can better analyze music, and then you can better understand the beauty and the power of the music. I believe music is the greatest art of all the arts, and I'll tell you why. It is a real-time event. If I go to the concert, I sit and I listen to the concert, and I have an aesthetic experience in my chair in real time, and depending on the performance, it's better or worser. But some of the greatest moments in my life were listening to music. The most memorable times of my life were listening to a particular piece of music. Not every day of my life, maybe every once in my life, and this whole feeling of aesthetic rush, you know, we feel that a lot of ways. But the other thing is, I can take a measure or a chord or a note or an interval on a graphic piece of paper, on a notation, on score, and I can look at that note and think about its meaning and its power and its beauty for as long as I want. So then I'm having a plastic art experience that has nothing to do with the real-time experience. So I think that's another separate aesthetic experience, is just looking at the music. I can also have an experience playing music that's different from listening to music. I can play a piece of Bach that I would not want to hear someone play it like that. I'd listen to some other person play it well, but I can have a real aesthetic experience playing the piece myself, or have another aesthetic experience conducting the piece with a group of musicians, another aesthetic experience playing the string bass in the chamber orchestra than I have playing the piano, and another aesthetic experience improvising on the piano or the tuba or trombone or whatever I choose to improvise on. All of these are separate and individual. And also there's musical theater. That stuff kills me. Okay, that's why music is the greatest art. Now, I think let us begin learning music theory now, unless you have a preemptive question before that. Do you have any questions up to now about anything that I can clarify, that you won't have to remember any longer? Okay. Where to begin in music theory? Well, is it a diatonic thing, or is it not a diatonic thing? Well, what does diatonic mean? Diatonic means in a scale. So we really didn't even get the concept of diatonic, that's nice, until hard to even say. Like, if we recall our music theory history lectures, when there was the Council of Trent back in the late 15th, early 16th century, who can remember the Council of Trent? That's when the Catholic Church said, no more funky rap music in the Mass. We're just gonna sing the words as clearly as possible. Now, what happened then? There became a person named Palestrina, which is actually a town, but anyway. Palestrina wrote music according according to the Council of Trent. And it was still modal, but it was becoming more tonal. And what does tonal music mean? Tonal music means that one note is more important than another note. So we will begin our music theory training with determining what is tonal music. We lost the markers immediately. Okay, so there's tonal and there's diatonic, there's atonal and there's chromatic. Not all of those mean the same thing or different. Diatonic means major or minor. Chromatic means there are alterations to that. Tonal means one note is more important than another note, and atonal means all notes are theoretically equal. So let's take my personal favorite note, a middle C. Now what do we need to know middle C? Well, gosh, that's not even on this stuff. This is called a staff. This is called a treble clef. And originally it was called the G clef because the little circle went around the note G. This is a bass clef, and it was traditionally called the F clef because the two little dots were on either side of the F. Now back in the day, we'll just do vocal style for now. We used all kind of clefs, and the ones that we also use in music theory are the tenor clef, which is usually mostly associated with high cello parts and high trombone parts. And the alto clef, which is predominantly with the viola. Now there were, back in Bach's day, between the Renaissance and the Baroque, they used these clefs more than they used these clefs. And they also had this clef, which I believe was called the dono clef, mezzo clef, and then there was the soprano clef, perhaps. Now, why different clefs? What's the reason for this?
Readability.
It's true, but what makes it more readable?
Less ledger lines.
Less ledger lines. Now, here is a good key to arranging in instrumentation. If you write the notes in the staff, that's the range of the instrument. Isn't that nice? Now, so what was it really? It was sort of a printing, music copying thing. The notes tended to get lost if they were on ledger lines, harder to copy and harder to read. And learning about notation is a whole other study which we won't get into. So when you're doing musicianship, you want to know everything on this clef, everything on this clef, everything on this clef, and everything on this clef. If you can do that, you can probably do everything on those clefs too. Another nice little trick for arranging, if you know your clefs real well, you just write the notes out in a different clef and make the appropriate chromatic alterations. The other thing that we want to do when we're teaching theory is this. If the note is C, say C. Okay? But if we're in the key of D, you want your students to say C sharp. Don't just say diatonic letters, okay? Now, what does diatonic means is the letter names. And we only have so many, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. A going up, the notes get higher. Going down, the notes get lower. So you want your little children to be able to say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, G, F, E, D, C, D, E, to be easily able to go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, G, F, E, D, C, D, E, and to be able to say that backwards. Now, how does a student be able to say the notes backwards? G, F, E, D, C, B, A. They practice. You have to practice it. Also, if you want your students to move their hands in opposite directions, they'll also have to practice them. The things you want your students to be able to do, they have to practice. So, the first thing that we learn is we've got a note, we've got a ledger line, okay? Now, we have lines and spaces, and it doesn't do anybody any good to do every good boy does fine or things like that. What does do well is like that really helps. The ledger lines above the treble clef spell ace. That is much easier for the mind to get around than it is to say all cows eat. All right. So let's just presume that all the children can read the stuff on the clefs. Now, how does this ace help us in another way too? Below the treble bass clef is also ace, isn't it? So that's very helpful there too. Now this is another beautiful thing here too. The top of the bass clef spells ace, and the bottom of the treble clef spells ace. Okay? Do you see all the aces there? If you get them, one thing about little learning tools, if you get them slightly wrong, they're completely wrong. So be clear on that. All right. Now, if we go from line to space or space to line, if we go from line to space, we are moving to adjacent letters. If we go from line to line, we skip a letter, or if we go space to space, we skip a letter. So we can put this in diatonic terms. This is a diatonic interval of a second, and this is a diatonic interval of a third and a third. Also, space to line is a second. Diatonic intervals are only useful diatonically, meaning within a scale. So, if I use the C major scale as an example, our diatonic intervals are as follows: second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh octave. That's a diatonic interval. They have no meaning. Diatonic intervals have no meaning. Intervals, we have two things. We have size and we have quality. Okay? The size of this interval is a minor second, and I make many bumps in the little m's. Want no confusion on that. Between this interval is a major second. Okay? So now we're already starting to think, oh, okay, how do we know this is a major scale? Well, it sounds like it, all right? All we know is what tradition tells us. I mean, this could be a scale in some other world. Or they probably don't do music. How did we come up with the major scale? A lot of opinions on that. There are a lot of opinions. What is the most important note? Well, we're gonna say the tonic. But it is not really the most important note. It is the central tone of a key. Is it central as in the middle? It is from which and for which everything goes from and to. Everything comes from the tonic and goes to the tonic. But really, we don't have a tonic without scale degree 7 or T. Because unless we have a leading tone, we don't have a tonic. Unless we have something that goes na na, we don't have tonic. If we just have na, those kind of pieces are getting more popular than ever. Na, unless we go na, na. So that brings us to our next point. Our two kinds of seconds. Major second, minor second, major second, major second, major second, minor second. Okay, that's how we build all major scales. So it doesn't matter where I move the tonic, it's going to have this collection of major, major, minor, major, 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 minor. Okay? Now, let's think of it this way. There are two major seconds and a minor second. Is that helpful? All the little... Okay, and here we have two major seconds and a minor second. So what that leaves out is this major second in the middle there, right? So we have non-overlapping 4-note things. So these have the same structure, major, major, minor, major, major, minor. Does that make sense? So whatever, if I start the C scale, do, re, mi, fa. If I start on G, so, la, ti, do, could also be do, re, mi, fa. So it's those middle two notes that are connecting. Now, just to review, tonic, supertonic. Do we know these?
Negative.
Subdominant. Dominant. And the leading tone and the tonic. Now, why is the submediant called the submediant?
It's like the, oh, sorry.
No, you're
Because it's just like the median, except that
That's something. There is a relationship between the median And the submediant?
The mediant's a third above the tonic, and the submediant's a third below the tonic.
Right, that's where Stephen was going to also. Yes, Stephen? So we're going, yes, that's a third above and that's a third below. And also they have what we call it's that fifth, fourth relationship. Perfect fourth apart, or the mediant is a fifth above the submediant. Does that make sense? Okay, so now we have what we call real intervals, which require size and quality. So size is the diatonic, and the quality is the specific. So if I go, we say major sixth. All right, so now we're already getting into the realm of intervals. So intervals kind of have to go the same time as scales when you're teaching people things. But intervals are a lot more complicated. They really are. Because scales are just diatonic. Well, a major scale is the easiest thing you can do. A minor scale is, I don't even refer to minor scales as minor scales. I refer to it as the minor mode. So when we approach the minor mode, natural minor, none of those really happen in music, okay? They're a blending of all of those. If you're going up to tonic, you use melodic. If you go from dominant up to tonic, you raise the notes. If you go tonic down to dominant, you lower the notes. And it's a musical thing, so we think of the major, the minor mode, and we use all three of those variations, even thinking from the B-flat fugue. On the second page, melodic going down on occasion. Why? It fitted his fancy. So all of the minor scales are just sort of melded together. Now the one that the pianist always learn is in fact never used. The harmonic minor scale is not used in music because of the augmented second, which is outlawed in common practice period music. What is common practice period music? It is late 18th century. Did I say that right? Yes, 1750 to 1800 is second half of the 18th century. Now, who would that involve most readily? Who are we talking about? 1750 to 1800. Mozart and Haydn, early Beethoven, Bach's sons. Bach was really not that influential because of just the way things were. He's much more influential now than he was in his own lifetime. His sons were more popular than him. So we're talking about Mozart, early Beethoven, Haydn, bunch of other guys too, just tons and tons and tons of music. But in a traditional sense, we've learned harmony not from that, but from the Bach chorales, which would have been more of a early 18th century thing. Now, what are the Bach chorales? And let's think about that right now, because it is so, actually, the MacHose theory book that they used to use at Eastman for so many years, and nobody uses it anymore. He taught all of harmonization from the Bach chorales, and he did a statistical survey of every kind of chord and stuff in the Bach chorales. So what are the Bach chorales? Well, he did 371 chorales that he harmonized, and 69 melodies that he wrote the bass and the figured bass for. Okay, now, those are not 371 unique chorales. He did some as many as 5 or 6 or 7 times. Some of them are unique. Now, what was a Bach chorale? They were a Lutheran hymn. Now, what were Lutheran hymns? Melodies taken from the Catholics, basically. So where did that all come from? From a Gregorian chant through modal music, we arrive at the Lutheran hymns, and Bach harmonized these modal melodies into very rich diatonic music as opposed to modal music. It's now diatonic. And an amazing, beautiful thing. I have a study done by an author who's now dead, but he took the same chorales and put them side by side and, transposed them all into the same key, so you could see the different choices Bach had made for the chorales. And that is a huge, rich resource of harmony and harmonization. So, as you can see, this is all total mess already and confusing. Now, let's think about intervals. What are intervals? Intervals are the distance between two tones. Now, what is a tone? A tone is an air vibration that hits our ear, and it is of a specific pitch as opposed to, those are kind of pitchy, but I can change the pitch range. Okay, so take a pitch. Well, let's take this pitch. That note is electronically vibrating at 440 cycles per second. That's 8/440. Now normally, this hammer would hit the string, but that's not exactly what's happening there. And then that vibrates the air, and it goes into our ears, and then there's the hammer and the sickle, or stirrup, and hammer, stirrup, sickle, I don't know. Anyway, then it wiggles in there, and then it hits the fluid across the cochlea, and then there's some kind of magic, and then we hear stuff. It's called a psychoacoustic event when we hear things. It's really kind of hard to know how we hear stuff. And one tactic that you can take in pedagogy of music theory is how students perceive and how students learn. It's all very confusing though. All right, so if we're going to use our tuning system, which we're going to choose to do, we have how many chromatic notes? So every interval should be a collection of the smallest possible interval, which is a half step. So here is how we describe steps and half steps. There can be a minor second, that's a half step. There could be an augmented second, that could be a half step. There could be a doubly diminished third, that could be a half step. But we have chromatic half steps and we have diatonic half steps. Let's see if we understand the difference. E to F is a diatonic half step. Or F sharp to G is a diatonic half step. F to F sharp is a chromatic half step. Or we call them semitones. Semitones is another word for half step. So you could have a DST, diatonic semitone, or a CST, chromatic semitone. So in a diatonic system, a half step is a minor second. Okay, so that being said, any collection of any simple interval, and a simple interval is an octave or less, can be, we can determine how many half steps it is. All right, so let's do that. Well, first, do we know diatonic intervals? Yes? Okay. Let's do intervals first, and then we'll go back to that. All right. All of this you can do in terms of what's called a modulo 12. All right. So let's count C to B. Now we don't count C because it's a note. It's not an interval, is it? C to C sharp is an interval. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So an octave is 12 half steps. Okay, does that make sense? A major 7 is 11 half steps. Everybody understand that? Okay. Now, why am I teaching this? You'll probably not teach it to your children, but it's good to know. If I said a perfect fourth, we can describe it as a perfect fourth. We can describe it as a collection of 2 whole steps and a half step, or how many half steps? 5 is correct. Okay, let's just count them to be sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that means a perfect fourth is 5. What is the inversion of a perfect fourth? A perfect fifth. So using modulo 12, what would its interval content of half steps be? 7. See how that goes? So using modulo 12 and using inversion theory, we're going to describe all of inversions now. Okay? So the easy thing is perfects become perfects. Yes?
Yes.
Augmented becomes diminished. Major becomes minor. And vice versa. These obviously go both ways. Perfect. Plus to zero, augmented, I like to use the plus sign, or you can use an A. Diminished, I like to use a 0, or you can use a D. These are usually superscripted, meaning superscripted. Major and minor, big M, and a definite cursive little m. Well, you'll get a lot of this in music theory for major and minor. Major, minor. It's just too much trouble. Just count them wrong. The first day of class, count as many things wrong as possible. Okay, given that, seconds, sevenths, thirds, sixths, fourths, fifths, unisons, octaves. So all of this should, so if we have a major second, that's a minor seventh inversion. Do we know what inversion means? You take the same two notes, but what was on top is now on bottom. Okay, so if I want to say in the bass clef, C to F is a perfect fourth, then when I move F below C, it is a perfect fifth. So it's not in the same location. It has to be inverted. So let's think of all of our inversion things. 1 to 8, 2 to 7, 3 to 6, 4 to 5, and backwards. 7 to 2, 5 to 4, 6 to 3. Major to minor, perfect, augmented, diminished, blah, 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 blah. Same time, with half steps, 11 becomes 1, 10, 2, 9, 3, 7, 5, 6, 6. Now there's the important one. What is 6? It's the tritone, and it splits the octave in half. Now, we call it the tritone. We call it the tritone. I'll play one. Now, is that a diminished fifth or augmented fourth?
Yes.
Well, all right, here is the question. Is this a diminished fifth or an augmented fourth?
Augmented fourth.
We'll try again. I'll write it on the board. 4 to 5.
Okay, so that's
This is what I just played. So that's an augmented fourth. Yeah?
yes.
Okay, you ready? You ready? I did not play that. I played put the note head there, please. That's a G flat.
That business just.
So now it's a diminished fifth. But when I do this, it sounds like a tritone. That's what one pays for to get a music degree, is really to figure out the difference between the augmented fourth and diminished fifth. Really is tonal music. That's what tonal music is about. And I simplify things to a greater degree by telling my students, you're paying your tuition to understand how to resolve the dominant seventh chord. Okay, and anyone who's taken my class knows that we spend about 2.5 years on the dominant seventh chord because it is so important. It's really, really, really important. Okay, so did you understand inversion using modulo 12, using inversion theory, and etc.? Now, to apply this little bit of skill training to ear training, I can discuss this in a few minutes or a few days, depending on the level of the class. But to get them to actually hear and identify that, I'm gonna take the first semester, really, basically. So, can we now teach a student how to build a major scale using intervals? I think that we probably could. So, wherever we start, give me a note, Lynn. Hardest note possible.
F sharp.
F sharp. So, major second, major second, minor second, major second, major second, major second, minor second. Or whole, half, whole, half. Tonic, subtonic, median, subdominant, dominant, submedian, leading tone, and time. Now, there is one change to the names. Do we know what that is when we switch to the minor scale? The natural minor scale does not have the leading tone. What do we call that now? Subtonic. Subtonic. And it has its own major chord. Now, we've learned a major scale, yes? So there can be an interval between every note in the major scale, right? Second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh octave. And between all the other notes too. Now, so the first kind of dictation one would do is on the major scale, and it might be, I did it with two hands, and every note is a C. So here's our first exercise. And then the student writes down, all along the bottom is a C. Okay, well, we'll just set this exercise up. This is going to be our first dictation test. Those are all C's. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so then I do this. And then the student would write A and write big M 6. So that's how we would do that. All right, let's do another one. Now all of these are going to be major diatonic. Okay, just keep track in your head. Next one. Next one. Next one. And so we went through those quickly. So major 6, major 3rd, major 7th, perfect 5th, perfect octave, perfect 4th. So what y'all got? Good. That seems super easy, but not going to seem super easy to your first day students, unless you're teaching a graduate pedagogy music course. It's fairly easy. Okay. let's talk about intervals in another respect. What's another thing that would be discussed when we discussed? That's a Socratic question.
Harmonic versus melodic.
Excellent. Okay, we know the difference. Harmonic is simultaneous and melodic is sequential. Same time, different time. All right, what else? The one I'm looking for, what Socrates is looking for before he dies, is what about intervals?
Exponentials outside of piece measurement?
Not so much, no. Still just talking about the abstract interval.
What do they sound like? Like, how do you figure out which one is which? Such as the perfect four sounds like the wedding song.
Oh, yeah. Well, let me tell you. Consonance and dissonance. Okay? That's really where we're at. And it's only consonance and dissonance as applied to common practice period tonal music. Okay? Because if you're talking about music of 1948, the dissonances are consonants and the consonances are dissonant. Okay? But for common practice period music, thirds, there's two kinds of consonances, perfect and imperfect. Perfect consonances are octave, unison, fifth. Now everybody's waiting for me to say fourth. Fourth is a dissonance. A perfect fourth is a dissonance, and I'll explain that in a second. It can be a consonance, but if we're talking about an abstract interval, a perfect fourth is that word, dissonance. Okay. So the imperfect consonances are major thirds, minor thirds, major sixth, and minor sixth. Or in other words, thirds and sixths. When doing counterpoint, thirds and sixths.